right, man. So it looks like we got some news coming out with some new polls, post-debate polls that have come out afterwards. Now, pretty much all the debates on the topic of who won the debate were definitely in Kamala's direction, but the numbers all seem to be lower than Hillary's first debate and Biden's first debate. But nonetheless, they do seem to be pretty big margins in the 20s, and I think one of them even was 30%. But nonetheless, we got some new polls dropping, so everybody wants to know how are the numbers going to change after the debate. I do expect, obviously, polls to continue coming through. So we did get hit with the first wave. Yesterday, we had our first poll that had come out that we looked at, right, where we did see an increase from the SoCal poll by 1 point. There's also something else that's also important to mention as well that I will mention in this video as well. But we have our first poll that we're looking at here. So there's a new Ipsos poll that came out. So it's a general election poll. You can see it says Harris 47% plus 5. Trump at 42%. The prior poll was Harris plus 4. This is coming from Ipsos, which is a B-rated pollster, which is decent. 1,405 registered voters, which is a good poll sample size. It's registered voters and dated 9/12. So what we're able to do here is we could take a look and kind of see what the makeup of this exact poll is, and we can kind of check to see a little bit on like what the poll looks like here. But you can see here 47-42 Harris plus 5 for these numbers. And if we take a look at the previous Ipsos polls, kind of gives us a little bit better insight. So we'll compare registered voter poll to registered voter poll. What you're able to see here is Harris is at 5%, plus 5, and then Harris is plus 4 in the prior one. So Harris goes up by 2, and then Trump goes up by 1. Now, do keep in mind that this is 21 through 28. So a 2-point boost for Kamala Harris is actually probably a lot because there was actually a slight contraction going on, so I think you have to take that into account as well. But what you are able to see here is Harris goes up by 1 in the margin, but Trump also went up by 1. She went up by 2, he went up by 1. So the margin has gone up by about 1 point. And then if we go ahead and take a look at our next poll here, we could take a look at our second poll that's dropped. We do have a couple of these. So we got another general election national poll that has dropped. So it's this new general election poll post-debate. Harris is at 50%, which is really important. I think for a lot of these races, I personally don't care about the margin anymore. I'm more so looking for, are you hitting that 50 marker? The only state where I actually would like her to be above 50 is actually Wisconsin, because Biden actually underperformed significantly in that state. That doesn't necessarily mean that Harris is going to underperform. She might overperform. In fact, I'm expecting her to. However, we do kind of want to project after, off of like prior data. But what we're able to see here is an increase by 2 points from plus 3 to plus 5, which is a big boost. This is being compared, I think, to a prior poll. So it says Morning Consult C-rated 3204 likely voters 912. So pretty too large of a sample size. I feel like you want to stick to 1,500. Once you start to get a bigger sample size, starts to kind of water down the poll. This is also likely voters, by the way, which, funny enough, it does seem that Kamala Harris does better with likely voter polls and polls with leaners. But we could take a look at the Morning Consult poll here as well. So what we could see here is we look at the September 11th poll that dropped. This is the post-debate poll. What they have is they have Harris plus 5 here, 50 to 45. But the day prior that they took the poll, on the day of the debate, I don't know how many of these voters or when this was taken exactly in terms of did this include the debate or not, but it was 50-46, Harris plus 4. So it's pretty interesting to look out for is, because of her weaker performance during the debate, there might end up being a situation where Donald Trump looked absolutely insane. He looked more like he lost the debate than she won. So we can see Trump goes down from 46 to 45. So Kamala didn't actually increase her support. It just stayed put. So it's important, I think, for us to also look at, like, okay, how are the numbers composing themselves in terms of the boost? So if the Trump numbers go down, it's actually, I think, better for you to get the votes instead of him going down. Because I think there are probably not people who are converting away from Trump, but there's probably going to be a higher likelihood of people who are Trump supporters not responding to requests for polls. So polling requests will be ignored, sort of just on the grounds of like social shame. They see how crazy he looks. So to be clear, it's not that they're like on the phone lying or whatever, but it's just they're just not gonna answer the phone, because in 2016 there was a problem of there's always a problem of non-response, but in 2016, because of the educational divide, what ended up happening was there was an oversampling of Hillary supporters in a lot of the state polls, because higher educated people just have a higher likelihood to respond to polls. And that was one of the big divides in the election, where educated people went for Hillary and non-educated people went for Trump. So it ended up missing people. So a poll like this, I think, is probably going to miss those people. People are going to be less voting for her. But I think it's important for her to be able to hit this 50 marker. And so from this September 6th to 8 poll, she's boosted up 2 points. And from here in the morning consult poll from the day prior, it's up 1 point. So there does appear to be some kind of surge happening. And when we take a look here and sort of look at these national numbers in general here, what we're able to see is on the 21st, she kind of starts to get into a rut. So 3.3 and sticking around there, right? So here she kind of sticks around, and then she finally breaks through on the 21st. She broke through a rut on the 21st. And then she kind of goes up a little bit more, but sticks around in the 3s. And then officially on the 8th, she dipped below the 3s. Now, there is an influx of bad polls. However, there has been a slight contraction happening for Kamala Harris in the numbers. Even polls that are very favorable towards her, like Big Village, for example, would always have her +7, +5, etc., had her going down by about 1 point in the margins, right? So there was a slight contraction, and that was also a point that I wanted to make. You also probably want to take that into account because I think, for example, like for this Ipsos poll, there's a contraction happening after this, right? So on the last date of this poll, for the Ipsos poll, it's 28th is the last date of the prior Ipsos poll. So right at the end, all through here is all boosting, right? And then right after this, there's a drop off. So in terms of like a regression sort of a prediction, you should predict a lower number based on where the aggregate stands. So if you think about it that way, in terms of like, whoa, a poll that came out after the drop, where it should have been predicted to be a drop, this could be a larger boost potentially, maybe. Where it's like, okay, the margin is +4. It was projected to drop, and so that may even be a stronger movement in favor of her, where it's like, oh, in order to go up one, you also had to eat like a 1 point contraction. So maybe it's like a 2 point boost instead of a 1 point boost. That's also something to keep in mind because the last time they took a poll was in the peak. And so all this area in between has all been regression, right? It's all been receding, right? The hairline has been receding, right? You're balding. So that also might be missing that in terms of looking at like that exact margin, right? So keep that in mind as well. But what we can see is she has gone back up to 2.8 in the aggregate. She was down to 2.6 yesterday, 2.7 on the day of the debate, and 9th at 2.8. So the question I think overall, overarching, will be in the poll numbers, is she going to be able to have a bounce back where she does have like this sort of systemic bounce back? I think the big thing will be, can she get to +3.2 or higher? And the other question is going to be, how long does it last? Because a lot of these kinds of boosts that happen, whether it's like, if it even exists at all, like a State of the Union boost or a debate boost or whatever, if they do exist, they end up being very short. They kind of come and go, right? They're very fleeting. They don't last very long, right? So that's another possibility for us as well we have to take into account. So regardless, though, time is sort of starting to run short. I still think the election really hasn't started yet. I think maybe it'll take till the end of September. It still feels like nobody outside of political junkies really cares. But it does look like this is what's going on. So these are, two of the new polls that have come out. I think that the Rasmussen poll, they couldn't let Kamala take the lead here. So the Rasmussen poll, I was kind of laughing because it was Trump +1. They decided to stem it. That's not a post-debate poll though, but that one is another one that had come out. And so we have like a couple of those post-debate polls. We also have this post-debate poll as well. So we got this YouGov Times poll. The last poll is Trump +2, so I think this is referencing the sort of New York Times poll that came out that everyone was panicking about. Harris is up 1 now. However, in the likely voter number, she's up like 5 or something like that. But that wouldn't be a one-to-one comparison with what the likely voters were. However, that Times poll was oversampling Republicans, a sample size like R+2, which is obviously not naturally what it is. That's what they weighted it to be. But we got another surge here of 3 points is what it looks like here. So there does appear to be somewhat of a surge. It's probably like 1 or 2 points, I would say, max. 3 at the absolute max, but that seems way too massive. Again, some of these polls are hard to measure because of the contraction that happened. You have to take that into account too. There's a projected contraction as well. So that's also hard to compute. But I would say maybe 1.2 point. And then you also want to look at the composition and say, okay, well, what is the composition of that? Is Trump losing support or is Kamala stemming her support? That ultimately is a really important question as well. So, and then will it last? But we'll keep an eye on the aggregator as well. We'll kind of see what happens with this aggregate, sort of data here. But she has rebounded by a couple points, 0.2 points to be exact, since yesterday. So we'll see if this continues, and I'm sure there will be a swave. Maybe it probably happen over the weekend where we'll start to just get flooded. So I'll flood you guys with video content and everything on it for sure. So I'll keep you guys in the loop. So make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't already, of course. But those appear to be the numbers right now. Kamala Harris rebounding a little bit, having some surging going on in the post-debate polls so far.